Hi, hello everybody. I'm absolutely delighted to welcome you to Black All Year. And this is just it's our first evening event, so we'll see how this goes. I just want to say, first of all, if you've missed any of our previous events, they are available on YouTube and as a podcast. And if you're watching or listening after this event, please like and subscribe. That allows you to do a couple of things. It makes sure that you won't miss any future material, and it helps others to find the content. So it's a really good thing to do. I always say this, but the reason for Black All Year is because when we look at events and things talking about Black issues, they tend to focus around Black History Month. And I personally got really sick and tired of being inundated with requests to talk during Black History Month, and then largely the issues were ignored for the rest of the year, and we are Black all year round. So hence Black All Year was created. And what I hope is that we're going to highlight issues and challenges, as well as achievements and experiences of Black people, who, after all, we are the minoritized global majority. So today we've got a really interesting, I think, session coming. We have some young people with us. Sorry, I'm just trying to get my notes here and they're flicking all over the place. We have some young people with us, and they are going to talk to us about their experiences of being young and being Black, ethnically minoritized. They're all members of the Angelou Centre's Young People's Network, and the Angelou Centre is our nominated charity today, and I will share the details in the chat and the comments so that if you want to donate to them, you can do that. So I'm welcoming Samara, Jola, Jocelyn, and hopefully we'll have somebody else joining us shortly, and I hope that she gets through. And I think it's particularly relevant today. So the Independent newspaper is reporting on a survey of Black Gen Z, Gen Z title, but anyway, Gen Z talent in the UK. And that's been done by a recruitment marketing agency called Tap In. And it's found, amongst other things, that 22% of young Black people reported changing their name on job applications to improve their chances of success. And that is a significantly higher level than white peers, and interestingly, Asian peers as well. 47% of young Black people said they altered their names to make them easier to pronounce whilst in work. 45% of young Black women avoided wearing their hair natural because of unwelcome scrutiny. So for me, I found that really disheartening, because that's very similar issues to issues that I had when I was young, and to be honest, that continue today for me. But I also know that while some or very little has changed in some cases, there will be some things that are very different experiences for our young people and somebody like me who is significantly older, although I'd love to claim to be young. So welcome. I'd like to start by asking you each just to share a little bit about what your biggest concerns are at the moment, and what is it that you are most happy and or proud about. So Samara, could I come to you first?
Yes, of course. Hello, nice to meet you, Samara.
Oh, Samara, you're really quiet, so I'm not sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let me see if I can figure that out.
It's okay. I can hear you better now.
Can you? Okay, great. Is that better?
That's
great.
better.
So I'm from and based in Newcastle. It's nice to meet everybody. So the first question was something that I am proud of.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think something that I am proud of is, well, probably more of a general sort of thing to be proud of, but being born and bred from Newcastle, I've grown up here for a very long time, and for a long time in my life, there wasn't many Black people in the city at all. But because we have two great universities here, it's becoming a lot more diverse, and there is a lot more sort of facilities for young people of colour, and young people who come from different demographics and who are of colour as well. And I think that's something that's really important, because that's something that wasn't around when I was a lot younger. So I'm proud of that. I'm proud that the Angelou Centre provide spaces for people of colour, young people of colour. And I think it's really, really important, because if I had something like that growing up, probably from the ages of like 6 to 18, it would have really helped me. So it's something that I'm really proud of for the city. It's becoming a more diverse city because of the 2 great universities that are here. And I'm walking around the streets and seeing a lot more people of colour, and there's places for them to go and hang out. And that's something that I'm really proud of. So yeah, that's something that I'm very proud of. The second question was a concern, was it? Yeah, so a concern for me is that despite the fact that, you know, it's becoming a much more diverse city. I work in recruitment myself, and a big concern for me is that there's not that many people of colour in high executive roles, which means that people of colour get overlooked. I was discussing the other day with Nikita and Jola, working, it was my first role in recruitment, and I actually experienced one of my colleagues who was a lot higher than me bypass someone because they had a foreign name. So they assumed that their first language wouldn't be English, and they actually just bypassed their resume and application. So they didn't really get the opportunity to even be considered for the role that we were recruiting for. And I really put that down to having not many people of colour in high exec roles. So I think that's a big concern for me, because off the back of that, that means a lot of people's talent and intelligence will get overlooked simply because they have a foreign name. So yeah, that's a concern for me.
And I think really, really pertinent and important points there. And I think you're right. If I think back to when I was growing up, I used to joke that I knew every Black person in Newcastle. Not quite, but almost. And it has changed massively now. So it's a great city to live in. And that diversity is just making it better. So
I used to say the same thing, Steph. I used to say, if you don't know that Black girl, you'll at least know her name.
Yeah.
We all know each other somehow. But yeah, great.
And Jola, would you like to share?
One thing I'm proud about, I think it's kind of a bit similar in terms of, I wasn't born and raised in Newcastle. I moved here after studying and living in Durham. So there was less diversity there as well. But, you know, coming into a country from a country that I was a majority, Black majority African country, to, you know, a country where I was considered a minority was very, very strange for me. And also kind of having lost some kind of community in terms of the women in my lives that I was surrounded by. It was really, really important for me to find kind of a space for myself as well. And I think after, you know, once I moved to Newcastle, I was able to be surrounded by different age ranges of amazing, powerful women who, you know, have been just, yeah, like powerhouses, but really supporting, mentoring, guiding, friendly, and just overall welcoming. And, you know, they've been, including the Angelou Centre, have just been amazing at building, I would say, part of who I am now. So getting me back into my writing, getting me back into working, and just, yeah, that's what I'm proud of. And concerns, I think, would be in the increase of more right-wing policies and views that kind of permeate society, even though the diversity in Newcastle is increasing. There's still a lot of work that needs to be done. And I'm kind of concerned that it's just people are becoming a lot more confident to be extreme, to be honest. And yeah, that's my major concern. Yeah.
I knew I wouldn't unmute at some point. Yeah, thank you. I can really identify with that. Yeah, it's. I think it's just the last few years. It's been quite interesting seeing some of the things that have happened. Joycelyn, I hope that you're there. I know you've got your camera off at the moment. If you would like to share anything, please feel free.
Cool. Hello, everyone. My name is Joycelyn.
Joycelyn's on a station in case you can't tell.
Is it too noisy over here? I'm so... Can you hear
It's
me
all
now?
right, we can hear you.
Yeah. Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Joyce. I work with the Angelou Centre as the volunteer coordinator. So first of all, what I'm proud of, I am actually very, very proud of being a Black woman who keeps striving for greatness, even in times of difficulties. It's not easy, but I'm proud of how I keep pushing myself forward, and seeing that I keep involving myself in communities where I find people who look like me and sound like me to motivate each other to be great. So I'm very, very proud of that. Secondly, I'm also proud of family. I do really love my family a lot. So as far as they are away from me, they keep supporting me mentally, emotionally, physically, like however they could. So I'm really proud of having them still alive. What my concern has been since I came to England. I'm originally from Ghana, born in South Africa. It's quite really new since coming to Europe. The attitude and response I get from people who don't look like me. I do 2 jobs actually. So I work with the Angelou Centre and I also work as a senior support worker in a care home. And I'm literally the only Black woman and Black person in the whole entire working place. And the racial attitude I've been getting for the past 3 years, it's not going to put me down, but I think it's a very big much concern in our community, just because I am a Black woman who is in a senior role amongst a group of white people. Has been very challenging for me, but that has been a concern because I might be able to handle that. What about other people who are striving for greatness in that same field? So that has been a really much big concern for me as an individual.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm sorry that you've had to experience that, but actually that again, I think is something that many people can identify with, being the only Black person. And then you really are in this position where, do you speak out or do you not? So just kind of taking some of that a little bit and thinking ahead to our next event, which isn't till September, we have an event around education. And I know that one of the topics that you were quite keen to talk about was about diversity and inclusion in academic spaces. So are you all working at the moment, or have you recently been studying? Be interesting just to know what your experiences have been of that.
Yeah, well, for me, I graduated last June. It seems like longer ago, but time passes so fast. So yeah, last June, I was studying a master's at Newcastle University. It was mainly sort of an online because of the COVID restrictions, but there was times where we had to go onto campus and, you know, hand papers in and meet lecturers. And, you know, it's widely known that Newcastle University is a very white institution. And there has been so I'm not sure if anyone else has heard, but there's been several stories of racial incidents that have happened within that institution, and not really much has been done, or not enough has been done to resolve them.
And Samara, can I just ask, so when you say it's a very white institution, what do you mean by that? Because we've just been talking about the diversity that the students brought.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. So I mean, I can only really talk from my experience and what I've discussed with friends, but what I mean by it being a white institution is the lecturers, there's just not many lecturers of color at all. And, you know, because I'm quite a politically driven individual, a lot of my papers, my thesis was sort of modeled around race and brand activism, specifically, you know, right after George Floyd was murdered. I was sort of doing a case study on brand activism, and a lot of the things that I wanted to portray, or that I wanted to maybe dig in a little bit deeper, I didn't really feel comfortable approaching some of my lecturers with issues, because I knew that they wouldn't really understand on a level that I wanted them to understand. And I wanted to be able to have like a back and forth conversation with my tutor, so they could help me develop ideas. And I really, you know, as much as, you know, a lot of white people do try and understand Black issues, I think there's a limit there to how much they can and how much formative advice that they can give back to you. And I really struggled with that. Obviously, you know, I have friends of color that help me out with my ideas and stuff, but there just really wasn't that support there for myself as a student of color. And I did discuss this with other students of color as well, and they had felt the same. And again, I think, you know, the same way as it works in employment, if there isn't really that representation there or support from marginalized races, then I think a lot of ideas, talent can be overlooked and intelligence can be overlooked, and it doesn't really get explored as deeply as it should and it could. So that for me, like the thing that really helped me when I was doing my master's and not having that support in the academic space was things like this. You know, the Young Women's Network from the Angelou Centre, we used to have like fortnightly meetups on Zoom, where it was just a space for us to vent and discuss and talk about things that might have annoyed us that week. And that was a really nice outlet for me, and it actually helped me build confidence when I returned back to school, and I could sort of apply that confidence into my thesis, and when I was sort of corresponding with my lecturers as well.
Yeah, and I don't know if people get that. I've just been having a kind of, or trying to have a similar conversation with the school around, you can learn the theory of things, but unless you are really embedded in that and have been doing that for years. So there are some white people who really get it, and that's the only way I can describe it, isn't it? They get it, they understand. But unless you've been in that situation and you've lived and breathed it, it becomes really difficult. And actually what you're at risk of doing is almost paying lip service to it, or painting too thin a picture of what's going on. You don't understand the complexity of things. So then when you're trying to have a conversation with somebody about the complexity, it's just not there at all. And actually, I've had conversations where they've kept taking me back to the surface, and I'm like, no, we need to. I don't want you to teach the surface. You need, even if it's appropriate for the skill level or the age, that you do just teach the surface. You need to understand the depth, because there'll be a question or a comment, and you need to know what that is and what that might lead to. So it's a real challenge that I know that there's a real issue amongst lecturers of colour anyway, nationally. And the more senior you get, the more senior people get, or the more senior the levels go, the whiter they get, which you see in so many areas. What about the rest of you in terms of kind of education, your experience of education?
No,
Someone, Joycelyn. Shola, do you want to go?
Okay. Sorry, Jocelyn. So when I first came here, I did study in London, and I went to an international school, so that was a bit much more diverse. But once again, just like Samara was saying, the teachers, there weren't a lot of teachers from Black communities, and so as I moved to the Northeast, then to Durham, it was, I think, throughout the time that whilst I was at Durham, there was probably only one that I'd met, and I remember my first class, actually, when I walked in, you know, everybody turned around, and the lecturer even asked me if I was in the right room. And he asked me again, and I had to confirm and say, am I in blah, blah, blah class? And he said, yes. I said, well, yeah, I'm in the right place. And then, you know, I'd also been told, like, you know, some people said, oh, you just like here, like a space filler, you know, the diversity in the quota in the whole department. Because I didn't have other people. There was one other student, and he was Ghanaian, but he was actually of mixed modules, so it was different departments altogether. and you'd hear things like that, like constantly. You just have a lot of racist experiences, and you could go to your lecturers, you could go to your department heads or mentors or whatever, and you know, they would either apologize, say that's terrible, we'll give that person a talking, but they didn't really they didn't understand. They couldn't really feel the pain that you were going through, and sometimes it would be shrugged off. So as you continue to go through all of that, when I finally got to find a job here, and started working and volunteering within the community, most of the stuff that I've done has just been related to people from the global majority. So people who are from Black, Asian, and other minority ethnic communities in, you know, the Northeast, because I feel that that pain and that struggle is relatable, and we can kind of support each other through it. And also, I think it's a much more healing way as well for me to avoid a lot of the extra microaggressions whilst trying to challenge it at the same time, because it is a massive burden when you're working within a space where you're already feeling threatened. So, I mean, with all the stats that you've mentioned, I'm not surprised and shocked, because like I said, I did know someone who actually changed her name to get a job. And that was pretty shocking. I've had people look at my CV years ago who removed my name, my first name, and put my second name as my first name, Esther, to say, you know, that would be actually better. And I've changed it back, you know, because no. Yeah.
And I think, I mean, so, and this is, I would say, for me, that's really common. For my generation, really, really common. I have relatives who can't pronounce their own surnames properly because their parents changed the pronunciation to make it easier. There are people who have used their English name rather, or Western name rather than their African name, because, or their Asian name, because that is easier for people to pronounce. Interestingly, my brother did the opposite, because he's got an English first name, but he uses his Ghanaian name. So that's really common, but you would hope that as the world gets and the country gets more diverse, that would become less. But actually, you do still see it. It's one of the things that I like to do, is when somebody tells me their name and they say, oh, but you can just call me so-and-so, I say, do you want me to call you that? You know, I prefer people call me Steph than Stephanie. Or is it that you think it'll be easier because I can learn to pronounce your name? And I think it's important that people do that. Yeah, Lynn, it's funny, she's popping with Lynn in the chat box, but I met Lynn as Lynn, and Lynn is now using her first name, which is her Nigerian first name, Ngozi. And it's not that hard to learn, you know, but that's how we people, you know, people think that it is. And as Ranjit's pointed out there, yeah, people can pronounce Arnold Schwarzenegger, they can learn to spell Siobhan and Neve. So yeah, it's a strange one. And I was really interested in what you were saying there about actually you've kind of made a conscious decision to work mainly with people from the global majority.
Yeah.
Because it feels how would you describe that?
It's a lot, I would say, a form of therapy as well, because it's less stressful when it comes to dealing with the extra kind of racism that you would experience sometimes. And I think with the kind of skills that I have as well, that I've developed over the years, it kind of benefits people from my community, I think. And I can also offer what therapy I've gained kind of back into the community. But also I do realize that sometimes, because now, for example, my current job, my contract is finished. So I've looked at other places to work, and I thought, yeah, these roles sound amazing, but what is the ethos and the structure behind the company that is there? You know, how, what kind of, do they have Black people in that system that are actually safe and feel like they can voice their opinions and live normal, healthy lives? Or is it just like, oh, we're saying we're amazing, diversity, blah, 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 and then you come in and it's an extra burden? I have to look out for myself as well. I'm someone who, I don't have to I'm someone who's lived my own life. I have chronic health conditions. I've lived through hell, and I don't want to put that on myself as well when it comes to working. But I constantly kind of have to rethink, like, okay, I went to uni here, what were my experiences? If I did experience racism again, reporting it to my bosses, how would they react and how would they treat that? Or would they join hands to work and say, oh, well, we'll support you, but not really completely understand? And would I have to kind of re-traumatize myself to explain that? Having someone in places of positions of power that can make change is very important in a company or an organization. So I don't want to have to work in a place where I'd have to change who I am. Yeah, that's how I view it.
Yeah, and it's a real challenge, isn't it? Because it's that thing of actually we have so much to bring to the workforce, but actually then if we feel excluded and then remove ourselves from diverse or from non-diverse workforces, maybe we're losing it. I'd love to bring Jocelyn or Samara in on that, because obviously you've already said that you're working in white dominant environments. Jocelyn, did you want to speak?
Oh yeah. So I just wanted to say that I've had basically similar experiences, but so with my personal experience, I did my master's at Teesside University. It's a very, very diverse community. There are so many. I've been to Newcastle College. I've been to Newcastle University just to walk around and see how the environment is. I think it's much of a white-dominated people there. But in Teesside, I could boldly say there are a majority of other people from cultural background, which made me quite very comfortable and welcome in that environment. The only problem I had was the communication barrier amongst students and lecturers. So personally for me, I could understand most of it because of how they spoke, and I could, like, it was much more clear, but most of my colleagues and the students, especially from other cultural backgrounds, had it was so tough for them. They complained several times to the lecturers, but it was like not bother for them to really take it seriously. I think to them, it was like you knew that there was a language barrier for coming into this country to study. So it wasn't, as much as they complained to the student union and other authorities, there wasn't much effort put in to make it change. And to me, I think this is because we are paying fees, huge amount of fees to come and receive education. And if our concerns are not heard or put into effect, it's not beneficial for them. And how would they even pass their courses? How would they even study? How would they understand what they are studying? And our courses involve research. It needs you to understand what you're putting out there. And also, there wasn't much diverse lectures, as Samira and the other lady said. Most of them were probably from this country. And we literally had, with the whole department, business department, we had just 2 Indian lecturers. And that made us, and what about the Black people? What about the people who look like me? How can I relate with another lecturer? If the Indians have their lecturer, how would I be able to relate? So even though there was a little bit of diversity amongst the lectures, I also felt a bit isolated, like excluded from it. I need someone who looks like me to be able to communicate with in terms of, yeah.
Yeah, and that's that risk of talking about BAME, isn't it? And we've talked about it regularly in these events of actually people would go, oh yes, but look, you've got some diversity there, and it's actually there's a huge, well, a massive cultural difference between somebody from the Indian subcontinent, from Southeast Asia, and somebody who is from the Caribbean and somebody who is from of African heritage. There's just massive, massive differences between them, and to kind of go, oh well, it's okay because there's an Asian lecturer there, so that they'll understand. They'll understand a tiny bit, and it's a strange one. I'd just like to move the discussion on a little bit, and one of the things that I think is concerning a lot of us at the moment is things like the cost of living and things like you are all young and kind of starting out on your careers and your lives. How do things feel for you in terms of just that more general economic state? How the people keep talking about getting your foot on the housing ladder and things like that. Is that a pipe dream for you? Is that something that actually you feel is tangible? Is it something you'd want to do anyway? I'd be really interested to hear your thoughts around just kind of that whole economic inclusion.
I would say I was having a conversation about this yesterday with a friend, and I was saying, I don't know what it is, like this generation. It's something that, for example, getting a house, buying a house, it's something that I want, but that is it's going to be extremely difficult, especially now with everything going up. Everyone's stressed about their bills. People don't know, for example, if you think about the structural systems here, sometimes you don't actually get the proper support, which is why, fortunately, we have the Angelou Centre. I could always run there. But if I didn't, the kind of support that I could have received would be kind of, I would say, poor, really. And yeah, you constantly worry about money and constantly worry about how you're going to survive as things kind of go on if we go into a recession, and also employability in terms of like, okay, if things do get harder, and I'm applying for a job and someone's gonna go, oh, her full name, oh, well, that hit me out. That's a bit, I can't say that, let's not hire her, and let's go with John Smith, just because of the name, then that puts me in a worse off situation just because of my name or because of my race and because of my color and who I am. So obviously that's something I'm constantly worrying about. But it's also reminds me of, because my previous job, I was a community development worker. So some of the people that I did work with as well, they were already struggling before the bills went up. And now I'm constantly thinking, how are they doing? How are they surviving? How are they doing? Because some of the cases that were referred on, I had to micromanage, even though they were referred on to, for example, citizens advice, other services that were available, but they weren't being supported fully. And there is this massive need for like holistic support, because when it comes to people, like once a piece of the puzzle is pulled out, so for example, you have problems with housing, you can't get a house, you're homeless, you can't really support yourself when it comes to universal credit, getting funding in, a bit of money benefits, you're looking for a job, you need an address, all these kinds of things kind of trouble. If you are no recourse to public funds, then that's even worse. You can't get access to any kind of benefits. You can't, work in most cases. Sometimes you're still fighting for your right to remain in the UK. You're homeless. You have children that you need to support. You can't pay for those bills, healthcare. You have to pay for your healthcare. It's just a cycle. So when it comes to all the financial changes that are happening, it is a massive stress for me. Yeah, so it's just, yeah, massive.
And Jocelyn's just saying there that it's in her experience, it's easy to get kind of unofficial jobs in her experience, and like care worker, support worker. But even with that, you've then got to work your way up to a higher position, and you can come in with really high qualifications. I think that's one of the things that is quite a common experience around particularly Black people, is that you could have a master's degree and yet you're struggling to even get a job as a cleaner. And people assume, or you take a job as a cleaner because you need a job, but then people assume that that's because that's all you could do, and that you don't have anything that you could do more than that. And I wonder whether actually there are other ways in which being Black affects that financial situation, because I think you've obviously mentioned no recourse to public funds, but actually a lot of other people are experiencing that similar situation of really being worried about how they're going to pay the bills. Do you see that actually being Black has another layer of complexity over that at all, or do you think it's probably quite similar for a lot of people?
For me, I would say yes, it does. Because even our experiences are different, our needs are different, or how we're treated in certain cases are different. So if you think about healthcare, my friend and I could go into the GP and complain about the same thing, but they'll kind of shrug me off and tell me, well, from most cases say, oh, well, you can just go to the pharmacy and pay for that. Whilst my friend would get a prescription sheet, and because she's on universal credit, she doesn't have to pay for it. I would be told to go to the pharmacy and pay for it.
Yeah.
When I could have, it could have been done the other way around. Or for example, because I'm a cancer survivor and I've had cancer treatment, so some of my health issues have come from that. So normally some of the medication you get should be free, you shouldn't pay, but I have to. Yeah, because the whole system, out of the system, told me that I shouldn't pay. Now, I was the only Black person out of all of my other white friends as a cancer patients who were given this advice. They were supported through all of it, but I wasn't. So I'm looking at myself and I'm thinking, am I the only one? So I asked another patient years later who's also Black, and he's had no advice as well. So, that's just a little example. So yeah, it does come into part of it.
Samara, can I bring you in? Because I think there's something as well about, so if you're worried about your job, because you need that to pay for things, how willing do you think people are to speak up about some of the things that go on and some of the experiences that they had? I was interested when Jola was saying there about going in to complain at a GP practice, and I don't know if you, Samara's, witnessed this, where you suddenly you're getting really angry apparently when you're complaining.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I've been in the situation where I've tried to make a conscious effort to not get angry, because I don't want to feel that stereotype of being the angry Black girl. However, I also am a strong believer of, as women in general, we should be able to be angry, and we should be able to show when we're angry as well. So rather than sort of closing us off from that emotion, it's really natural to be angry. So why can't we be angry? Like, and we have a lot of stuff to be angry about, to be really honest. Like, but yeah, of what Jola was saying when, she was saying, if you apply for a job and an employer sees your name, sees it's a foreign name, that is a barrier already to you possibly having access to buy a house. Because if you're applying for a job that has a good salary that could allow you to get onto a property ladder, if there is an employer there who says, I don't want to hire that person, that's a barrier there that's stopping you from getting access to capital. And I mean, yeah, the rise of living costs is something that worries me every day, and it's due to go up in October as well. And to be really honest with you, I don't know if I grew up thinking that I'd own a house. One thing that I do think is really important is that kids and kids of color in general it's important that we have like financial, well, we get taught financial intelligence. And I think it should be taught in school, really, because I left school not knowing how a mortgage worked. I left school not knowing how council tax worked. And so when I came out and I got access to an overdraft when I became a student, I went absolutely mental. And, you know, I've got a job now that's all right paid, but you know, the reason I did my bachelor's and master's is because I wanted to have access to financial freedom, because it's something that does allow you to be able to acquire a house and just to be able to enjoy life. And I think something that is a big component of that also is being able to, and knowing how to manage your finances. And that's just something that, well, it's not something that I had access to as a young person, because my mum and dad worked full time. So whether they didn't have the time or they were still learning how to manage their finances as well, it wasn't something that I had access to. So I think it's important that is a thing. But yes, going back to your original question, when you said, you know, has there been times where you felt angry? There has been, but also, you know, that's something that I'm still learning now, is just having confidence in my voice and my experience. And there's been many times when I've been the only Black person in the room and I've had an argument, or, you know, I've identified some hypocrisy or discrimination, and I've had the argument on the tip of my tongue. And I've really felt, you know what, Samara, if you want to stay in this space, you need to not say that. Otherwise, they're going to shun you, or they're going to overlook you, or you're just going to be fired, you know. And there's been times, you know, I mean, I'll not mention the company, but I worked for a long time for a retail company in Newcastle who are very well known, and that really, someone racially abused me, and the way that was sort of investigated just really wasn't very thorough at all. But I needed the job, so I didn't really follow through with it, and I'll always regret that. I will. But on the flip side of that, I think I saved myself a lot of trauma and mental health strain. But yeah, I can definitely sort of relate to that experience of not wanting to feel the angry Black woman trope, but then also being internally angry. And it's not pretty when you're internally angry, because when you know, you should be able to express yourself.
Yeah, and it almost feels like a bit of a vicious cycle, that you don't feel that you can express anger when you should be angry, because we're branded as angry Black women in particular. So then you don't express yourself, so then you get more angry. And yeah, it's really difficult, isn't it? And you're quite right, we should be able to be angry about things. When something's wrong, you should be able to be assertive about that, and you should be able to be assertive and polite without being told you're getting out of control and you're angry, as if angry is a bad thing.
Yeah.
It's a bit like when women get told they're hysterical, isn't it? It's a similar thing, but we're not just hysterical, we're angry and hysterical.
Yeah.
So yeah, and I know that Jocelyn's just popped, she can't speak in the group at the minute, but she said actually when employees request race when applying for jobs, and she said, what's that got to do with experience and qualifications? And I think that's really interesting, because I can probably explain this one, but I think it's because employers don't explain that. So if I think about where I work, we're really aware of the fact that we don't have a particularly ethnically diverse workforce, but we haven't been measuring it up until now. So we know just by looking around, but we don't have the figures to prove that. And one of the things that we want to be able to say is how many people who are applying for jobs have come from ethnically diverse backgrounds, how many then get shortlisted, how many get interviewed, how many get the job. Because if we have 100 apply, but only 2 are shortlisted, we need to look at why. So for us as an employer, it's not about actually we need to know it makes a difference to your experience or anything like that. It's, are we doing something that stops people getting through? So it's about us checking ourselves. But if we don't explain that to people when they apply, it's a logical conclusion that people are going, they want to filter me out, and the complete opposite. Now that's the organisation I run, and I would hope that because I run it, it is a very welcoming and inclusive organisation. We've still got work to do. I can't guarantee that that's what every organisation that asks that question does. It should be removed from So by the time it gets to the people who are actually looking at the job descriptions, any of that data should be removed from it, but that doesn't always happen as well. And we've already talked about names. Names are fairly identifiable. If you weren't born in this country, your school, fairly identifiable. So there's loads of things. And actually, we have got a session as well coming up around recruitment and things like that. So we've got about 10 minutes left. And if anybody who's watching has got any questions, then please, either raise your hand or pop the question in the chat. But I know one of the things that you're quite keen to do is, well, how do we change this? Because some of the stuff you're describing is stuff I still experience now. Some of it is stuff I experienced when I was younger, and maybe I just don't care anymore. I just kind of, I've got a thick skin and I'll fight it now. But some of it is new. And it very much is new. But what I'm assuming you don't want is you don't want your younger siblings or children or whatever to be in the same position in 20 years' time. So what do you think? What would you think we need to do to start changing some of this?
Well, if we're talking like employment, recruitment, and being economically included, we know what the people look like at the top, but I think, after the year 2020, after George Floyd was murdered, and then all these companies started having these like race initiatives, I think things like that need to happen. I think it's important for corporations and companies to have initiatives. For example, the company that I work for at the minute, they have an initiative where by 2025, they want to have a certain amount of females in exec positions, but also a certain amount of females of color in executive positions. And that's an initiative that they've set in stone and that each recruitment executive is trying to work towards. So we really always try and, for myself as a recruitment executive, I try and shortlist women of color over, as long as they're like, qualified for the role, I really try and make an effort to focus on them. So I think initiatives like that really help, but it's like, how do we get them in place when the people at the top are only bothered about budget and, expenditure? So it's really trying to penetrate those top board positions with people who actually are for the cause. But then also, a big thing that I'm an advocate for is having spaces like this where we can discuss and sort of rejuvenate the confidence in ourselves and be able to just share experiences. That year that I was doing my master's at Newcastle Uni, having the opportunity to talk with other brown and black women on Zoom really helped me and really helped my confidence when I returned to university the following day. And I think, if we all had those sort of outlets, then we could flourish. And it's just about sort of making those outlets consistent, and also just being able to express ourselves at our most authentic form.
I would say the same, really. Agree with Mara, and add on to the fact that creating more networks like the ones that the Angelou Centre has, that then link up to each other, because one network should support the other, so it should be like a chain, and then we work together to make those changes, those policies, to campaign together as well, because white groups always have their own kind of lobbying and stuff. I don't like that word, but still they lobby. So we should do the same in our own ways. So campaigning for changes within different organizations, different systems, policy, politics, whatever it is, together, whilst kind of being in our own networks that support each other. And yeah, I think, like you said, the same people at the top making change, replacing people that, calling out just absolute racism as it is, wherever it is, but also kind of having more people at the top in positions of power that look like us, that have our experiences, that will support people and kind of hire people like us as well.
Yeah, and we've got someone from Black Lawyers Circle on saying that they've created that circle for Black people in or trying to get into the legal profession to get support, to network, to educate, and to mentor. And I think, you know, it's exactly that, isn't it? It's interesting. I can't remember who it was I was speaking to, but they were saying when they looked at research on women on boards, you needed 3 women to speak out, 3 women on a board before they felt comfortable to speak out and to challenge. And I think one of the issues that we have is that when organisations are looking to diversify their boards, they get a person of colour and they kind of go, well, look, and myself and Ngozi are probably in that position. Look, we have somebody, we are diverse. Now, we can speak out, but actually that's putting ourselves in quite an unsafe position, because you're the only person and you don't know if the people around you will have your back. So I feel quite fortunate in that I know at least one, if not more, of my white colleagues on the board of another organisation, not the one I run, but another organisation, probably do have my back, and therefore I can say some stuff. But if you just have one person on the board and say, well, that's, you know, we're diverse now, or we're representative of our local population, which is the one that's normally thrown up, that's not enough to really make a difference in terms of people speaking out. Is there anything else? I mean, we're really interested to hear from people in the group as to what you think that we can be doing to try and change some of these experiences, if anybody would like to contribute. Because obviously we don't have all the answers. If we had all of the answers, then we'd have sorted it. So yeah, feel free to either unmute or pop something in the chat. Just, do you have access to things like mentoring and wider networks, kind of multi-generational networks? Samara or Jola, if you'd like to say.
Yeah, well, yeah, so the Angelou Centre has been great. The Young Women's Network has been great. My mum has been great. My friends of colour have been great. And yeah, and also, you know, social media as well, because I really sort of, as I was growing up, you know, I was like one of the only Black girls in my friendship group, and social media really helped me sort of find confidence in myself and find that community of other Black women, you know, learning about my hair and just, you know, the odd things, you know, it just really, really helped. So yeah, I would say I do have access to those things, but, you know, I think there can always be more space, because you have to remember that the status quo is white. So there could always be more space for access to those facilities for Black people, especially. Yeah.
Great. Well, I'm glad that you feel that this is perhaps one of those spaces, and you know, you've I hate to say this, but you've made me think about what I need to be doing to create more spaces, and I really don't want anything else to go on my list of things to do, but you've certainly done that. And obviously people who are with us today and people who are catching up later, that might be something that you want to think about. Are you helping to create those spaces for people to come together to have those discussions where they feel that people understand what's going on? So we're just about out of time. I mean, thank you so much for your time today. I know it's kind of quite daunting speaking to an old fogey, but hopefully I found it really, really interesting. And just looking, collaborating with others, Black leaders, Black Lawyers Circle saying it's important to collaborate with others, and it really is. You've really made me think, which is a good and a bad thing from my perspective, but you've really made me think about, okay, so what more should we be doing? It's great to hear how much the Angelou Centre has supported you and is continuing to support you. And I hope that kind of carries on throughout your careers and your lives as they change and grow. Joycelyn, I know that you can't speak at the minute, but yeah, thank you to you too. So I just wanted to say to people that if you're watching it on YouTube or listening to the podcast, please remember to like and subscribe, just to make sure that you see our future events and help others to find them too. I thank you very much, everybody in the audience, and thank you, Samara, Jola and Joycelyn. And our next event is actually in September. We have 2 events. So we have one which is all about education. So Black All Year Black Education, that's Monday the 2nd of September. That'll be at 12 o'clock. And we also have another event actually the next Monday, which is with Roger Klein, who anybody who works in healthcare has probably heard of Roger Klein, who did Snowy White Peaks. And he is going to talk about box ticking in recruitment and development, which is something that I think we're all aware of. So keep an eye on those. If you go onto Eventbrite and follow Black All Year, they'll be popping up to be booked shortly. But once again, thank you so much for your time. It's been really, really informative, and take care, and we'll see you.